if you allow me. So it's a very light-hearted question. It's a very light-hearted question, first one, small question. It's in Punjabi we say, sir, dane dane te more hungi. Would you please explain, is it true in Islam or does it apply to Islam at all? I don't know. And then I will ask another question, please.
But if you permit me, personalize it too. In case of, in your case, in the case of your in-law, if this is true, then the maximum number of danas are allotted to you. Is that not right?
I don't know, I'm asking questions.
Fine?
I'm asking questions.
Have you heard my answer? If your claim is correct, that dane dane te more hundi hai, then those 10 danas have gone to the maximum in your, to the share of you and your family-in-law.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, right. Because your in-laws are known to be for large appetites and good taste in food. Is that correct? So, next question.
The next question is, I'm sorry, I was not really ready. Question is, in Surah Shura, Allah Ta'ala has said, Shara lakum minad-deen ma wassa bihi Nuhan. The translation done is, Deen Islam, Hazrat Nuh, Hazrat Ibrahim, Hazrat Musa और Hazrat Isa का मजहब चला आ रहा है. This is the translation done in the Sixth again. My question is, and then Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Sabah, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ. This is about Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You see, and there is one poet who has said a beautiful two shares which are not in our, Jamaat. These are Bana Sari Khudai se Muhammad Mustafa pehle, na the Farishte, na tha Adam, na tha Zahir Khuda pehle. And then in na the Farishte, na tha Adam, na tha Zahir Khuda pehle. I don't know how far.
The second part of this couplet, I think somewhat changed by you.
No, I don't know, sir. I just heard that. That's why I'm just asking. And then in Jawab Shikwa, Allama Iqbal has said in Sher, Ki Muhammad se wafa tune to hum tere hain, ye jahan cheez hai ki Allah kalam tere hain. This is addressed from God to Rasul Muhammad. Now my question is it true that every religion was geared towards the final finish, which is Islam? Could you explain? Going back all the way in this picture.
You're quite right, I say. This is a question which applies to the whole religious history. And how can you expect me to answer this question in this short session? Because this question requires a very large answer, very big answer. Moreover, when you say all religions were geared towards the ultimate culmination in Islam, in that case we will have to have a larger specimen of religions in view than just those religions which were revealed to the Middle East or Middle Eastern people. Because when you say every religion does not emanate from Middle East alone, so then we will have to survey the horizon of the Eastern religions, Far Eastern religions, Northern religions, African religions, and so on and so forth. So the question has a very wide application, and it requires many books to be written after investigation. So how can you expect me to answer that question as you want it? The best thing is to agree with you, that's all.
The Holy Prophet has said, the promise of paradise. I shall guarantee paradise for you. When you speak, you tell the truth. When you promise, you perform. When you are entrusted with something, you discharge your trust. Safeguard your chastity, cast down your eyes, and restrain your hands from harming another. And there are even shorter hadiths than this, which guarantee paradise. What I'd like to know is that the 6 points here mentioned, does away with fasting, does away with prayer, and does away with charity and whatever have you in the Quran. So if we go by these 6 points, can they really overcome all the teachings of the Quran? Or in what way are
these 6 points which we have just decided, they form the fundamentals of religion and good form of life. So they cover everything. The truth, for example, if somebody, whenever he speaks truth, tells the truth. This is one of the most fundamental acts of piety or righteousness, which cover a very large field of activities. And if somebody is truthful, fundamentally, basically, such a man cannot commit certain wrong. His scope of wrongdoing or evil actions is limited. It's not like one who lies. The scope of evil is very wide, and those who are truthful people, their scope of evil is limited. So it is further limited with the next question and the next thing described, next act described, and the third and the fourth. So if you read them in this order, you will find that hardly there will be anything left. And if there is anything left, suppose, and maybe there are some, the overwhelming part of goodness will offset them. You know, these 6 points, if you follow them truly and strictly, I'll quote an example of the influence of truth over other actions of men. Here 6 points are mentioned. Once somebody went to Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him for just one thing. He said, I am a bad man and I can't follow every advice you give me. So just limit yourself to one advice. And I promise that I'll abide by that advice and will never break this law. So Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, all right, just be truthful, never tell a lie. Make a promise. He said, I promise. Now it is he himself who relates what happened next. He says that I was very happy. I said it's a good bargain. Just to tell the truth is nothing. He has not told me to do anything good or to abstain from anything evil. Just I speak the truth and that is all. So he said at night I got up and was about to go for stealing, on a stealing spree. And then immediately I realized that because I am a known thief, when I steal, I may escape capture by my cleverness, but in the morning they are bound to come and ask me if it was I who had committed the theft or somebody else. So I promise I will speak the truth. So that means that I am already caught. So he abstained from going out. And it's a long hadith narrated by him. He says that act after act, this is just the single promise of telling the truth stood in my way, and the evil acts which I was going to commit. With the result that after he had shed quite a few, ultimately he decided to be a pious man altogether. So truth is the fundamental of everything. In fact, this is one attribute of Allah, haq, which is called truth as well as it is an attribute of Allah. For example, beauty is not an attribute of Allah. Rahm is not an attribute of Allah. Allah is Rahim. But Haq means truth. And it is an attribute of Allah. That is straight truth is Allah and Allah is truth. So this is so fundamental. So if somebody is truthful, he is bound to end up in ultimate, what they call translate falah as, how do you translate falah? But not success, that's not right. Ultimate deliverance or salvation, that's right. I meant salvation. Is led to ultimate salvation. Because this is very important, truth is.
So these points are really for the people who are already believers of God, and it doesn't mention say La ilaha illallah, that you should know this, and then it's so really for the believers to keep away from the evil, and then they can enter paradise. My conclusion then is that these 6 points is to keep you away from the evil, and that's really for the people who are already followers of religion.
Exactly. Because he is rendering this advice to his followers,
yes,
to Muslims, and he is promising them the paradise, not to non-believers.
Right.
So yes, that is understood, of course.
Yes.
But in a way, they can also be covered by the benefit, by the beneficence of this promise. Because those people who are truthful and who have these fundamental good points in them, they are the people generally when you give them the message they accept. Because a truthful person always does truth. And who by habit is truthful, if you can make a message of truth to him, he is more likely to accept it than anybody else. So in that manner, in that way, it also applies to non-believers. That with these fundamental attributes or good habits, I promise them Jannah in either case. If the message of the truth is not delivered to them and they die, and they have these qualities, then they are bound to go to heaven because of this promise. And if the message is conveyed to them and they are truly truthful, then it's impossible for them to reject that truth. Because truth does not reject truth. This is why Hazrat Masih Maud has said that जिसकी फितरत नेक है आएगा वो अंजाम, who in nature is truthful and honest and good. Fitrat neek means all this. So, aayega wo example is bound to come ultimately. So, in a way, this is all comprising. Any other question, please? Or someone with good voice who wants to sing the poem or the sing of the
Yes, sir. Yes.
But how do we know that your voice is good? Do you have a testimony, some sort?
Actually, I want to.
No, that I agree. You want to. But there is what is the guarantee for the people to remain sitting while you are singing? Okay. After this question, please. Nothing again? But there are the questions.
I beg your pardon, sir. It's very embarrassing for me to get up every time and ask something.
Why?
Just I feel embarrassed.
You never ask embarrassing questions.
Well, sir, in pursuance of yesterday's discourse, about, I won't call it unnatural,
About?
I won't call it unnatural, but out of the way birth of Jesus Christ. I would like to know that why, after all, it was made so difficult for the Jews to believe in him. First of all, by giving him a birth which was out of the way of all the past, which was not at that time natural, and the phenomenon was not understood. One. And second, Jesus Christ started talking in parables. In parables. Thirdly, but we are shown and we are told, I should say, that Jesus Christ was very hot-tempered.
According to the Bible and New Testament, occasionally,
He was very hot-tempered.
no, not very hot-tempered. He was very mild and very condescending. According to the testimony of the Bible,
Even when he
3 or 4 occasions, he is known to be hot-tempered. But that is not the right phrase to explain.
yes, it's not in a bad manner, you see, to tell somebody in a hot temper, but I couldn't find a better word.
He is known to be sharp in tongue in certain instances.
Even at the last moment, you see, when he was on the cross, you see, he was not very polite and kind to his mother. Now, putting all these things together, I would like to know, you see, first of all, what was the reason of his being born without an apparent father? And second, after his advent, why he was not polite about that to his people, so that, you see, his acceptance by others could have been made more easier and pleasant.
This is the same objection as raised against the Muslim by the present opponents to the Muslim. And they say he is very sharp of tongue, he is short-tempered, and he indulges in invectives against us and calls us bad names. And number one, the similarities between the first Messiah and the second Messiah continue to be the same. Even in this respect, it was alleged against him as well as it was alleged against Hazrat Masih Maud. Now, you are in a better position to justify the first Messiah's behavior in the light of your knowledge of Hazrat Masih Maud's character. They pick a few things out of context and thereby try to prove that Hazrat Masih Maud was very harsh of temper, and their books are blackened with these allegations. While you know as an Ahmadi, you having read Hazrat Masih Maud's literature and having known his biography, you know that he was exactly the opposite. Yet at times he had to lash at others. And those are the times, knowing the background, now we can assess that those are the times when the enemy would not understand any other language. He deserved it very much. He earned it so much that ultimately he got that harsh treatment from a man who was the mildest of heart. This is exactly true of the old Messiah. You know the present day Mullah, but you don't know the old day Jewish Rabbi. If you project yourself into the language of the present day Mullah and the false allegations and continuous barrage of lies, unending barrage of lies against Ahmadis and against Ahmadiyas and Hazrat Masih Maud, consciously and knowingly, times come when it is impossible not to hit back in the same coin, just to give them a taste of what they are doing. We can't tell lies, but we can be firm in our answer and retort, and our retort sometimes can be biting, because that is the only vent available to us. So this is why you do not understand the Masih of the first Messiah, because you are not applying his situation to the situation of Hazrat Masih Maud. While you should have been in a position to understand and judge his behavior much better than anybody else. Number one. Number two, why there were other trials who appeared to be so hard. The same thing is applicable again in this situation. Hazrat Masih Maud was born like an ordinary person, and it was told to the Muslims that he would descend, yanzilu. Apparently, literally speaking, it means descend. So they are also put to a very hard trial. It was said that he would descend on a minaret which would be white in color and which would be situated on the east of Damascus. Why he never appeared there? So they are all parables. Somebody else spoke in parables and made the life, made the possibility of the present day Muslims to believe in the Messiah a very remote possibility. Because of those parables, because of these words like descent and so on. Why was it made difficult for the present day Muslims? The fact is that whenever a prophet comes, his acceptance is always made difficult, and Masih is no exception. Which prophet came before him who was readily accepted? In the way of those prophets and the people whom he addressed, what was the difficulty? The fact is that people to whom prophets come, they are in a frame of mind which prefers to reject rather than accept truth. They are a rejected people themselves. They have a distorted thinking. So even if things are not made difficult for them, they will themselves make the things very difficult for themselves. So as far as the constant is concerned, this is the constant. That the relationship between the coming of the Prophet and his rejection has always been the same. This is the constant, which never changed at the time of Messiah. To think that prophets came with such arguments as were overwhelming for others, and some prophets were given better arguments and some were less arguments, some were given easier situation and some more difficult situation. It is just a conjecture. Now turn the table and begin to visualize the situation of Messiah from another aspect. You will also find that Messiah is given, according to the same testimony, such power as apparently no prophet before him was given. He raises the people from the dead. He cures the lepers and born lepers for that matter. He takes some clay into his hand and makes birds out of that clay, and they begin to fly. Now, if you take everything literally, one should take these things also literally. So on the one hand, he is deprived of certain advantages. On the other hand, he is known to have gained so strong advantages over the rest of the prophets before him that the balance, if at all, is in favor of Messiah. Yet he is rejected. The fact is, and this should be understood, it is the people who are rejected first by Allah. And it is the rejected people who reject Allah's messengers. Whatever be the situation of that time and age, whether the arguments are strong or weak, it is neither here nor there. He will be rejected. This is the first law, and it has always held good in the light of history. Now, as far as these miracles, so-called miracles are concerned, today the ulama are demanding miracles from Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. And there are so many here who speak so violently against Ahmadiyya and sometimes claim, even in nearby Chennai, that if Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam had shown a single sign, they would have been the first to accept it. But he has not shown a single sign in his favor. So it is the signs which they demand. Now in the first instance when we are discussing his similarities to Messiah, I quoted different examples. Now I will illustrate this situation in view of Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's history, life history, and in relationship to Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam. Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam was also a Mahdi. So the same sort of allegations which are raised against him have been raised against all those who have some similarity to him, some closeness, some relationship. So in the respect of, in his position as Mahdi, he is to be judged by the conduct of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also, his enemies are to be judged in the light of the enemies, the conduct of the enemies of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now I make the point further clear after this introduction. Now, Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam's opponents say that previous prophets showed so many signs and wrought so many miracles, and you have not shown a single sign. And this is exactly what is found in the Holy Quran as an allegation against Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Holy Quran tells us, وَأَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ أَيْمَانِهِمْ لَإِنْ جَاءَتْهُمْ آيَةٌ لَيُؤْمِنُنَّ بِهَا قُلْ إِنَّمَا الْآيَاتُ عِندَ اللَّهِ وَمَا يُشْعِرُكُمْ أَنَّهَا إِذَا جَاءَتْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. These enemies of yours, those who have rejected you, they say that if you come out with a single sign, we will believe you. And they swear by Allah in the strongest terms. أَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ أَيْمَانِهِمْ. They swear by Allah in the strongest possible terms that, oh Muhammad, if you show us a single sign, we are going to accept it. Now one can ask these mullahs that you are saying the same thing to Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. And you say that so many signs were shown to the enemies of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the Holy Quran says that as far as the enemies were concerned, they couldn't see a single sign. As far as their eyes were concerned, like your eyes, they were demanding that so long has passed between debating the issue between you and us, and yet we have not come out with a single sign. But the Holy Quran continues to throw light on the philosophy of this attitude. And it says, وَمَا يُشْرِكُمْ قُلْ إِنَّمَا الْآيَاتُ عِندَ اللَّهِ. O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell them that Allah is full of signs. There is no paucity of signs with Allah. وَمَا يُشْرِكُمْ. But what can make you understand? أَنَّهَا إِذَا جَاءَتْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. If all the signs which Allah has come, you will not believe. So, the fact is, as I told you, now I am going to connect it with the my first statement, that the people who reject a prophet are in a state of mind that regardless of the fact that they are shown any signs or otherwise, they will not believe. So, when you go back and consider the time of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, now in the backlight of history you see so many signs. But those who were closer to those signs, they were blinded and they couldn't see. Now to further extend your imagination back into the history of prophets and tell me which are the people who accepted a prophet through signs. Quote a single instance. Moses showed 9 signs and glaring signs, glittering signs to Pharaoh and his people, and they kept on rejecting. Now you look back, you see wonderful signs and how blind they were, how could not they accept them. But those who were passing through that time, they were blinded. No prophet who is mentioned in the Holy Quran to have brought some signs or miracles is declared by the Holy Quran to have been accepted on the strength of such signs and miracles. Not a single instance can be quoted from the Holy Quran. So these things repeat themselves. So coming back to your question, the whole thing which I have explained applies to the fundamentals of your question. To say that poor Messiah was ill-treated and his situation was made difficult for the Jews, or to say that the Jews were ill-treated and they were not provided with enough signs for them to believe in that Messiah, is proved to be a wrong assessment of the situation in the light of the histories of prophets. Because whether they bring signs or not, whether things are made easy for the people or not, they do reject. And their previous conduct and their behavior and their treatment of their fellow beings and their hard-heartedness and their continuous habit of usurping others' rights and to tell lies and to commit all sorts of sins, these are the facts which already are responsible for their death. One such people who indulge in these follies mature in their follies. That is the time for a prophet to come and to warn. So the very few among them who are pious, who are exceptions, they begin to accept, and a process of polarization begins. And ultimately, sometimes with very severe signs from Allah, which shake the whole nation, they begin to believe, and sometimes generations after, from the time of the Prophet, they ultimately succumb to repeated signs and will of Allah, decree of Allah. But Jews were not ill-treated. That is the point. They had been committing such sins and such evils before Messiah came that for such hard-hearted people, everything was difficult to believe. This is why the Holy Quran goes on saying that you are the people who have been rejecting prophets before. You are the people who murdered prophets before, who opposed them tooth and nail, tried your best to destroy their message. So this is the language addressed to those among whom Christ had come. Understand, or there is still something left?
Very small question.
Please. On the same issue or some other issue?
No. The same subject.
Please.
I don't understand. You'd like me to believe the denial of the Jews of Jesus Christ was preordained?
What?
Was preordained?
No, I never said that. That is the word. if I really understand this, I never said that. If the word preordained is applicable to their own acts, not to the will of God, then perhaps you're right. This is what I was saying. What I've been trying to explain is this, that their past acts of evil and their hard-heartedness had pre-written their fate and had doomed them for that state of rejection in which the unfortunate people of the times of Prophet are found. Not Allah's decree, but their own acts culminating into a state which is ripe for rejection and for nothing else. This is what the Holy Quran has been saying and telling us. A decree from Allah or predestined in the sense that Allah had already decreed long before that they would be rejected, they would be destroyed, and they are bound to reject, and they have no other choice. This is wrong. This is never decreed by Allah. Yes, please.
Why did it address Allah as He?
He? You also address it as you, thou, or you, don't you?
Yeah, but must we say that He is great and He is one? Why do we say that she is one?
When I she you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Before. All right. You couldn't say it, could you? No. Out of the three possible references, we are left with two only. Either he or she. Now, what would you prefer to be called?
I would prefer to say he, but...
No. I said, what would you prefer to be called yourself?
Myself?
Yes.
He.
Why such vehemence to the word he? As if it was an insult if you were called a she.
Yeah, but no one has seen Allah, so how can we know that it is a he?
I understand your point. I was just playing with you. The fact is that Allah has no sex. He is neither a he in the human terms nor a she in the human terms. But the fact is that you could not call him it either, because it is he has a life, he has a consciousness, and he is life and the source of all life. So how could you call him it? It is our question. So but he is still neither he nor she. And you couldn't address to call him a eunuch either, because that is a bad thing. That is a defect, and he has no defect. He is not he or she, not because he is a eunuch, in between, but because these things do not apply to him. The human sexuality is a limited affair to the animal kingdom of this world. And this sexuality, the concept of this sexuality is not applicable to any heavenly body, not to mention Allah. Even the angels are neither he nor she. So the other heavenly bodies, whatever they are not made like a man and woman. So out of the two, you had to have a choice. And because more often than not, certain weaknesses are attributed to women in every society. Even in those societies which are called the so-called most modern and sophisticated societies, and emancipated society, still they are talking of women's liberation of women. If women were not weak, why should they be liberated? The very issue of the liberation of women proves the point that they are poor things, they are weak as compared to men, they are weaker. And because they were weaker and they had been subjugated by men, so the question of their liberation arose. So because it refers to a weaker sex out of the two, the word she, so it could not be applicable to Allah. So we were left with only he, or invent a fourth one. You see? You understand? Yes, please.
It's not a question, it's just a humble request of your servant that if we could have the privilege to know about your short biography in one of these most sacred meetings.
My biography?
Yes, please. Before Khilafah.
But that is not known to everybody.
Because there is not much written really, and many of us, especially the young
For others to write, I don't know when, but the fact is that I have always been, right from my childhood, involved in various institutes of the Islam. Parliament, India, India, then Taliban, then School of Community. I've been doing a lot in Pakistan and traveling the length and breadth of the country. So my life is quite an open life and everybody knows. There's not much to learn about it. Yes?
I've got one thing in mind that disturbed me sometimes. Khaja Muhammad Sharif is my name.
Where do you live?
Here in London.
Which family do you belong to?
I belong to Khaja of Chakwa district.
Khaja Rashid is a relative of yours?
Yes.
What is it to you?
He is my brother.
And do you have one daughter?
I've got two daughters.
Two daughters. Because I was thinking of mother and daughter who came once from Turkey to our house, and they also told me that they belong to Khaja family of Chakwa. Was it yours?
No, she's my niece. My half Khaja Bashir also.
She's your niece?
It might be.
Yes.
Or she might be...
She told me that she was a cousin of that Bashir who was in Singapore or in Burma.
Or she is my half Khaja Nazir also.
That was
He is my nephew.
So she is a relative.
She is my wife.
She is your wife. Your daughter. Right. I wanted to clear that confusion because they came once to help us in the house
2 weeks back.
2 weeks ago. And it came to pass that they were relatives of that Khaja
Bashir, who is in
Burma.
And Khaja Bashir, who is in Karachi, is my elder brother.
That I know. After I see you, I know more than you.
Yes, sir. Now, the prophethood of Moses, may peace and blessing of God be upon him, was very easy, in a sense that when he declared himself to be prophet of God, it was easiest thing ever in the history of prophethood that he was accepted without any hitch, as we know from the Holy Quran. Because I read most of the book, the Bible, which I found no difficulty in his
all of the story has been related by the Holy Quran or the Bible as I understood. So they have been reading the same book, but getting different instances altogether. Moses was not exactly that way. In fact, the Israelites accepted only in his leadership and in as much as they would follow him and migrate from the country of Pharaoh. It was in fact the political liberation which they had accepted, while Moses had to struggle all through his life to make them believe, and they would not. Even superficially, when they began to believe, inside they remained the same old idolaters. And he just turned his back for 40 days, and you know what happened to them? And when the time for struggle came, they said, "Oh Moses, go you and your Lord and conquer those cities for us, and then we will follow. In the meantime, we are sitting here." Is this what you call belief and the easiest manner of believing in somebody?
No, but their identity, was not lost, being the Jews from the beginning. In reference to the situation in Pakistan, for instance, we are brother in ring, being the Ummah of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then therefore, being in the case of Moses, for instance, being the Ummah of Abraham, or the other prophets from the beginning or the end. So there was no difficulty in that respect to recognize, the prophethood which has to become, whether it was Moses himself or anybody else who declared himself to be that prophet.
This is right.
For instance, Jesus Christ as well.
There was difficulty in his life.
There would have been, because they believe that Messiah has to come. Yes. And they didn't accept it. But it wasn't a personality they were looking for, or whether it was the prophet himself.
The fact is that whichever example you quote, the result would be the same. In the nature of prophethood there is no difference, and in the nature of opposition there is no difference. Prophet of all times have been equally maltreated by people of all times. And this is what I was trying to explain vis-a-vis the first question, that this is regardless of whether prophets come with strong arguments or weak arguments, with power behind them or coming not from a platform of power, belonging to a poor people and unsupported. All these facts are irrelevant as far as their rejection is concerned. Why are they rejected? The Holy Quran explains that, and I'll try to give you the whole picture tomorrow, inshallah. Because this question which you have asked requires a very wide treatment. I'll have to explain the philosophy of religion and why people reject their prophets and what happened to them. And the Holy Quran has explained it at quite some detail at different places. So inshallah, because there is no time now, we have to say Isha prayer. If you are here by tomorrow, or will you not be? Will you be here? Alright. Then inshallah tomorrow, we'll start from your question. Right? Now after all this discussion, I came to understand your question much later. In the beginning, I couldn't follow what you wanted to ask. But now it has dawned upon me that this is your real question. That why are people, having been provided with all the opportunity to believe in a prophet, reject him ultimately? And while the things are easy for them to believe, they still do not believe. What is the reason behind it? Is that all right? That's what you wanted to ask.